Value Impulses, the podcast for potential development, by and with Uli Vogel. A very warm welcome, dear listeners, to episode 14. Already of our podcast Value Impulses, the podcast for potential development. And we're already in the second season. And today I have a very interesting guest, or do we even say female guest these days? I don't know, but I have Gabriele Trachsel with us, whom I've known for ages. And who's also been in the business for a long time and really knows her stuff. With assessments, assessment centers, preparation for them, and yes, interview training, everything related to that, she's doing an excellent job. And we met many years ago. Actually. We just discussed it again through a business partner in Switzerland. And then you carried out profiling values. Well, and then Gabby, maybe you can start with the anecdote and then briefly introduce yourself so our listeners know what a great guest I have with me today.
I'd love to do that, dear Uli. Well, back then, Hubert Hammer, your colleague at the time, contacted me, I think via Xing, and asked if I'd be interested in doing a profiling. Curious as I am, I said, of course, I'd love to do that. And the result, it almost overwhelmed me because at the time, I was in the process of deciding whether to emigrate, to move from Berlin to Zurich, Switzerland, or not. And that was a super difficult decision for me. And the profiling fit so incredibly well. Shortly after that, you invited me to your first Value Congress in Munich. And since the profiling fascinated me so much, I said, okay, I have to go, and I brought a friend along. And then I have to say, at this Value Congress, I only met people who really fit into my philosophy. How I treat others, how I communicate, I felt so comfortable. And I certainly couldn't say that about all congresses. And I said, that was so great, such wonderful people. This is my system, this is what I want to work with. And then I spontaneously said right away, I want to start the training. Those were my first activities with profiling values, which I haven't regretted to this day. And I think I use all the products, although to varying degrees, but I honestly can't imagine my work without profiling values. I'll be happy to tell you why later. Maybe a little bit about me. A native Berliner. I think you can still hear it, even though I moved here to Switzerland 13 years ago for love. I have 2 grown daughters and families. And in January, my 5th grandchild will be born. And I'm really looking forward to this little treasure, who will then complete our family a bit, so to speak.
Wow, that's great. Those are the personal and human things. And for us, those always come first, because the human dimension of values is the most precious. And you've touched on that beautifully. I can remember back then, it was really very nice in Munich, or rather in Grunwald, a small suburb of Munich. Peter Schaffel was there too. And yes, someone from Mexico as well. And we really had a great group. And it's nice that you remember it that way. And we always get that feedback at our conferences that you meet people with high human standards and that people enjoy being in this community. And then we met, I think it was in Frankfurt back then, near the train station where you started your training. And we then trained you intensively there. And yes, the whole thing has grown from a vast wealth of experience, a real foundation of experience. And maybe you can tell us a bit more about your background. You were with a very large company for a long time, but you've also been self-employed for quite a while now. Maybe you could give our listeners an idea of where you come from and where you are now. And then they can perhaps better appreciate your expertise.
I'd love to. So I originally studied food technology and business administration both together because just business administration was a bit boring for me. I needed a bit more action. And I worked in various fields, food companies obviously, publishing, manufacturing, and later in the insurance industry. And I had to climb every management level through an assessment. That means I know from my own perspective how a candidate feels when they're being watched all day. And I've done everything up to outdoor assessments, like setting up a tent next to a campsite, and performing specific tasks, which ended up lasting for days. And then, within the insurance group, I rose to top management. I took on responsibility for 1,000 employees. And that included not just HR and personnel development, but also sales service, organizational development, and also training, so a large area. I enjoyed it immensely. I had a great team, and at some point, as I think many people know, it became all about centralizing more and more. And at some point, they wanted to divide Germany into 3 parts. And then I eventually said, not with me. I'll go freelance, but then I realized that I actually don't know how to do anything. I mean, I couldn't even use Excel or PowerPoint. My team was very, very good, and what I could do was, well, maybe make a good hiring decision and convince the board about the projects that were simply important to us. I had a knack for that, I could do that, but you can't really build a business on just that. Then I looked for a coach and, well, I just couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I originally started out with the application etiquette, and I started my own business. But I always looked for partners for things I can't do. Marketing isn't really my thing, and I didn't come up with the name application etiquette myself. My marketing specialist found it. It suited me well, as did the corporate colors. And so I first started with career consulting, applications, assessments, and well, as it goes, eventually you tell yourself you need to specialize even more. Then I said I'll only do assessments, career guidance, and the training of HR employees. And then later I felt I had to specialize even more. I then moved to Switzerland and continued with the training for HR officers. I could do that online too, and I tried to get a foothold here in Switzerland, which was much, much harder than I had imagined. I thought I'm a communicative person, I connect well with people, and I'll manage just fine. I have to say, it was a very difficult start, a very rough start. At some point I thought, well, they always say after 3 years you've made it. I kept thinking, I hope that saying is true. And it was true, after I focused more and more. That means I eventually gave up on the training. Then my husband said, "You're going to stop doing that now." Quite simply, it didn't bring in enough money. And he said, "You don't have to do that, you'll just focus on assessments from now on." And even though I've done a lot of coaching training, I'm not a coach. I'm very much a consultant and trainer, that's my passion. And for group training, I say, oh no, a few days of training. No, I'd rather work on very concise topics. And that's naturally how I found my target group. Top managers. Firstly, there's absolutely nothing on the market for top managers on how they could prepare. The level is simply just too shallow, right, for that first management level. Or if you go into an assessment after university, there's plenty on the market, but not for top managers. And then I thought, now I can use my opportunities and also my experience because I've already moderated countless assessments before and was there as an assessor. And I know why certain tasks are put together, how they are put together. And then I thought, okay, I'll use that now. Then the next issue was, how do I reach my target group now? So through networking events, forget it.
MHM.
That's not my target group. And also through social media, I know. My topic is already extremely specialized. Nobody prepares for an assessment that they might have in 6 months. And my service is only questioned when someone has an invitation to an assessment. That means I had to find something to reach my target group very specifically. Recommendations are one thing, but I think everyone can imagine, just with recommendations, that doesn't give enough. Orders. And that's how I came across the topic of podcasts, and I started it, I think, about 1.5 years ago. And it's running super successfully. And that's how my target group finds me too.
Yes, and that's how you approached me a while ago, or rather. We spoke and I've already been a guest on your show. You have a very specific audience at that point, but it's not just the people you get directly as customers, so to speak, but you also told me back then that very many HR people also listen to your podcast. And so you can really contribute more broadly, actually. But your story is quite nice and interesting because, well, there are many. And over the decades, I've also accompanied many who have dared to take this path from the corporation, from the larger company, into self-employment. In our profiling, you see that quite often, right, because with structured thinking there's a bit less there. Instead there's the idea of freedom that resonates behind it, and not going along with everything anymore. And of course, you expressed it very nicely, saying, yeah, but actually I can't do anything there, right? You could achieve a lot in the corporation, yes, but with your troops. And then you sometimes fall, I can well imagine, you described it very impressively, a bit onto the ground. And you say, yeah, okay, I can maybe move something there, but I can't actually do the groundwork, the operational work, really. And then I have to see about getting that done first. And then above all, and I really experienced this with many who have accompanied us, over the last few years, that you start a bit with a general store, so to speak. You've already done a lot in life, but you realize more and more, it has to be more focused, it has to be more specialized, and then, so to speak, you get on the path to finding this target group. And I find your target group very interesting. I've also been able to do, I think, over 5,000 assessments, individual assessments, in my life, so I didn't really have that assessment center experience. And in the last episode, I also talked a bit about what I did there. But I do find it very interesting how you manage to approach this target group as well. And now it would be interesting to know what kind of feedback do you get from your clients. When you have a seasoned top manager, well, they've usually built up enough self-confidence to get to that level. And then they come to you and you tell them quite precisely what's required and how things need to be done here. They sometimes turn back into little schoolboys, in quotation marks. But how? How do you handle them and how does it go? I think it's an exciting service in the market and our listeners will surely find it quite interesting too.
That's exactly how it is. Maybe, since you just mentioned schoolboys. A candidate for a bank's board of directors once came to me. It was about a bank merger here in Switzerland. And he told me that his children had wished him all the best early that morning. For the exam he had to go to that day. Excuse me. I found that really quite sweet because, he wasn't training with me, right? So the exam situation, the actual assessment, that only came later. And as for the consistent feedback, I suppose I have a gift for addressing the really difficult and critical things very openly, but in a way that the person can always accept it. And the feedback I get, I also have a public feedback channel, where I'm always really happy about the rating, not just the rating, but also the comments on it. And it's often said there that I hold up a mirror like that, and that they also learn for life. So not just for their leadership work, but also for life. I just had a client who told me the training was so great, not only did he learn, but his wife learned along with him. So the partners also get involved and engage with it. I just think that's great and fantastic, and it's a part of my training concept, right? I give out a lot of tasks for preparation and things that my clients have to deal with. So we don't do it one-to-one. And profiling is really the very first thing that I do. So profiling value is the first thing I use because, as a coach, you could of course work out many things in the corresponding sessions. For me, it's really about seeing immediately where there are or could be problems, when I know exactly what the target position is, why it needs to be filled, what issues need to be worked on. Or there are also cases, though it's rare, where I just say the training doesn't make sense in my opinion because there's no chance of success. And then I also say it makes no sense, and I'll just stop there, right? I often find that the person can't really accept that. Someone once gave me feedback that he was there anyway. And he understood in hindsight why he got a rejection, but he really wanted to do the training with me. But I mean, if the potential isn't there, you once called it an emotional refrigerator. I've really taken that into my own vocabulary, where I like to say today, if you're a CEO and have to decide what happens to 2,000 or 3,000 jobs, then, having a lower empathy score is much more appropriate than if you now, want to lead a company. And where there are simply points where it's just important that people matter to you, right? Can you trust them? Do you want to trust them? Or is it just lip service? And that's where profiling value is an enormous treasure. And my clients see it that way too, so they're always amazed, because of how I can practically draw my assumptions from the answers, and that it fits so accurately. And that's actually where a lot of trust comes from with my clients. So we haven't seen each other yet, we've talked on the phone or had a Zoom meeting, and then they do the profiling. And afterwards, we discuss the profiling. And then they say there's nothing to be found about the person on the internet. And the fact that my assumptions have a 100% hit rate gives so much trust that they really say, okay, we can work together great, this woman must be good.
That's a nice way to put it. Yes, I get that often in feedback too. And then I always say as a joke, of course I spoke extensively with your wife or your husband yesterday, on the phone. Everything was reported to me. But I think that's an important aspect, Gabby, that you're also so integrative in your approach. That means at such levels, we have to make sure the areas of life, well, they have to get along with each other. You can't just, so to speak, lecture about work here anymore, but as you also say, the wives or life partners, they end up learning along with them. You actually have to look at it a bit more broadly, because when it comes to, 2,000 people, as you just said, not going around like a refrigerator, but knowing clearly what the emotions are, how people are actually doing there. 2. And that's where it's important to take a closer look. Of course, also where the shoe pinches, you can do that quite well with profiling values. But I also think it's great that you give out preparation tasks accordingly, or rather have them done. I always do that in my leadership training too. So that people are already dealing with it, having to deal with it, so that when you finally train together in person, there's already a certain preparation, a substance there. And people notice. I saw it quite well on your website too. Always be prepared. That's not something you just shake out of your sleeve to perform at an assessment center. And I always think it's important, right? Such assessment centers are special appointments maybe, and you prepare especially well. But shouldn't we also prepare better more often for the normal appointments, for the interpersonal ones, for the board meetings, for the decisions that have to be made, and maybe even with your methods? So I think you've given many an injection on the way, so to speak, so that they pass their exam there. But I hope and believe that the long-term effect, that is, what it achieves beyond this exam, that you have a very strong, effect there too. And maybe that's also a bit related to the topic of values, that you felt comfortable at the Congress in 2011. That, when we speak in the community, you're also often at the events, that values are already a central topic. And that, leads me to the question, what role do values actually play in what you do, together with profiling values? You've already described the application well, but when you think for yourself, what central values do you work out for yourself? And how do they drive you to, continue to pursue your profession? But of course, the family with the many grandchildren who are already there and more on the way. An integration, to achieve something together. What are for you? Perhaps core values in that context.
So my most important values are appreciation, respect, and personal responsibility. And I live that too. So let's say, whether you're delivering a package to me or taking away the trash. Right, so when I see someone, I always have a friendly word, ready. Or in the summer, when it's hot, like a chilled drink. Or just in the winter, asking if you can refill the coffee pot with fresh coffee, And that actually led to a DHL driver ringing the bell again and saying, the stress is just too much for him now. He's doing something else, but he just wanted to say goodbye because I'm always so, friendly to him. And for me, it's just like, I don't care at all what kind of education someone has or what kind of job they do, as long as they do it well. To me, they're people and I treat them all the same, right? But I also have to say, I don't have a submissiveness gene, So I don't bow down, to the university professor, right, or whoever it is. I'm missing that gene, so. Showing respect and appreciation to everyone and personal responsibility is also important to me. Everyone has to, also do something themselves to be successful, and I'm happy to guide them on that path. But you have to take responsibility for it yourself, whether professionally or privately, and those are the values that drive me. And if you, violate the theme of appreciation, respect, especially those values, then there's a total break with me, right? Those are very, very important topics for me. And if there was someone with me once who said, as a CFO, with a simple accountant and so on, she didn't want anything to do with him, right? She wants to work with other people. That was a total break for me, so that was absolutely out of the question, right? So that's a break in my value system, and there's no way for me to work with someone like that.
Yeah. So, having that eye-level connection, between every person is something very, very important. But also, being consistent about it. And I also find your idea of personal responsibility very important. So we have to use our talents accordingly and they aren't just called upon. And you can't just sit back, you have to seek out your own path. Just like Robert S. Hartman said, trying to recognize your unique concept and then live it. So really finding out where I can enrich the universe, and thus making the point of developing the best possible person out of myself. And of course, that also requires consultants. And I believe you've already, helped many people get even more out of themselves, right? So my first boss always said, managers or leaders aren't developed, they develop themselves. But of course, you can contribute a little bit, give them a nudge, ask the right questions, and of course, have them do tasks so that they can learn. But I think you make a very big contribution there, also by, bringing people who are supposedly already so highly developed back down to earth. And then, maybe sometimes even doing the basics with them, but I think, and that's just your way, that you can, also, reach them. In the sense that they're also willing to question things. Except for that one case maybe, where you said it was cut short, but usually you manage to really engage people. And also, in my coaching or training sessions, that's often the point, right? Can I fire people up or not? Can I somehow get that across, that there's a higher good than just making a profit, but that it really brings something on a human level too. And I think, burning with that flame, you're doing very, very well, I would say. So, when you, look back now on being self-employed, and it's been quite a while now, is there anything where you say, that's exactly where I felt the calling? Or that's exactly the point where I can really say I'm centered? Is there anything else? You've already told a few things where you say, that might be good to bring up here in our interview.
I'd say it's like that for me with every assessment, really, that I always say, hopefully I'm the right person now, hopefully I'll find exactly the point that's so important now, right? And when a university professor came to me for the first time, I thought, oh boy, right, hopefully you're really good enough now, And he came to me with these words and said, I should grill him for about 2 or 3 hours, right? So profiling, with this procedure, right? He's not into that, he's done it before. It doesn't help him, right? And I said, okay, fine. If that's what he wants, then I'll grill him. Then it was the interview. And, for a chief physician appointment, you have this 8-stage, selection process. Similar to what Google has. And, that was 1 stage before the assessment, right, and I thought, okay. And I then prepared him for the assessment, where he then, for the, selection process, the interview. And then he said, oh yes, good questions. He didn't have an answer at first, right, and then he was just, well, he had to think about it. And said, that was really good. Then he moved on to the next round and gave me some feedback, saying that it had never been so easy for him before. And now we do everything I say, and whatever I say needs to be done here. That's what's being carried out, including the profiling. And he also gave completely different feedback during the profiling than he did for the test procedures he already knew beforehand, right? And he said it was really, fascinating as well, and for him. Also it really had for him added value too, right? And especially in a position like chief physician, so. From the value construct the man would have, you would really like him too, right? And but anyway, in a chief physician position, it's also about showing a bit more of an edge, right? And that was his main issue. We worked on that some more, and naturally, he's also very successful, chief physician and runs the clinic, with a very, very good public image too, so really, great as well. So right at the beginning, right, just a few hours of grilling, and you know, those test procedures, and then later really, the whole program, and he said it was great, it was fantastic. And yeah. He's a great source of referrals.
Very nice. Gabby, thank you so much for that example, and I have many too, and I think you have even more. Where we really feel that we've, well, helped, supported people so they can get even more out of themselves, so that they, yeah, often even grow beyond themselves, because they've, as you said before, been given that mirror. I also like to call it a development mirror, yeah, so you can really look in and see what adjustments can still be made, how you can move forward accordingly. Gabby, I want to thank you very, very sincerely for your valuable time today. It was really, really lovely chatting with you. Those images from the past came back to me too, yeah, 2011 and so on. And it's very, very nice that you're part of our community. And, I look forward to a long continued collaboration. And it's great, yeah, that you showed us here what you do and how you do it. I found it very, very exciting. Many thanks, Gabby.
Thank you, Uli. I was very, very happy to do it. It was also another great opportunity to have a quick chat with you. Thank you.
Thanks too. Bye-bye.